Hi, I'm Tahlia. At Thanksgiving dinner, my father looked me in the eye and asked if the money was helping. And I said, "What money?" The fork slipped from my hand. My sister didn't flinch. My mother changed the subject like nothing had happened. But that moment cracked open a truth they never thought I'd find. Turns out, while I was working double shifts and skipping meals to pay tuition, they were funneling everything, my trust fund, my name, my chances, into someone else's spotlight. Her spotlight. They didn't just forget me. They used me to build her. And I wonder, how long would it have gone on if I hadn't asked that one question? Would you? The scent of roasted turkey lingered in the air, blending with Valora's favorite sandalwood candle and the quiet hum of Coltrane drifting from the speaker in the corner. The table was dressed like it always was, polished oak, cloth napkins folded in triangles, and wine glasses filled just enough to look like celebration. Seraphine's laugh was the first sound I noticed, crisp, just loud enough to claim space without seeming like she was trying. She wore a cream-colored turtleneck and gold hoops that caught every bit of the light. Beside her, Valora adjusted the cranberry compote with a silver spoon like we were being watched. Maybe we were. By ghosts of Thanksgivings that actually felt thankful. I sat across from them in a sweater I'd owned since undergrad, still slightly damp from my hurried wash this morning. My hair wasn't done. I didn't wear makeup. I didn't need to. I wasn't the one on stage. I was here to eat, nod, and survive the evening. The turkey looked perfect. Of course it did. Virgil had carved it with the same careful precision he used on syllabi when he was still teaching ethics at the university. Everything was in its place. Except me. He passed me the mashed potatoes with a familiar warmth, his eyes squinting with the beginning of a smile. "Is the money helping, sweetheart?" My fork hit the porcelain plate with a sharp clink. My hand trembled, not from surprise, but from restraint. I looked up at him slowly. "What money?" It was like someone hit mute on the entire house. Even the jazz paused in my head. Virgil's face collapsed into confusion. Valora's fingers stiffened around her wineglass. She didn't look at me. And Seraphine. She kept slicing into her turkey, slowly, like she hadn't heard anything. My voice dropped an octave. "I'm sorry. What money are we talking about?" Valora dabbed the corner of her mouth, then placed the napkin carefully on her lap. "Maybe not now," she murmured. No one else said a word. I stared at Seraphine. The curve of her mouth hadn't changed, but her eyes blinked, twice in fast succession, like a code I wasn't supposed to break. 2 days ago, Valora had forwarded me an email by accident, meant for Seraphine, clearly. It had one line in the subject. "Here's this month's transfer for my sweet girl." That same night, I had dinner from a vending machine in the hospital basement. Soup in a styrofoam cup. It didn't bother me then. I figured they were too tight to help, that the fund was empty, or I wasn't worth dipping into it for. But here we were, at a table that reeked of everything I didn't know was being served. Virgil cleared his throat. "I thought," Valora said. I didn't let him finish. "No, it's okay, we can talk later." I chewed, mechanically. It might have been turkey or cardboard. I couldn't taste a thing. My eyes caught the glint of Seraphine's ring as she reached for her wine. Designer? New? Her watch was Cartier. That wasn't last season. I forced a sip of water. Every memory of the past year rolled like a reel in my mind. The nights I skipped meals. The second job tutoring anatomy just to keep up. The cold responses to my texts when I asked for a little help with textbooks. And yet, here was Seraphine, dressed like an influencer at a lifestyle retreat, sipping her mother's forgiveness in every pore. Virgil set down his glass. "I assumed you were getting something every month, too." Seraphine said. "She said I was fine," I interrupted. "Didn't she?" He looked at Valora again. She didn't return the glance. I watched her lips press tighter. That was Valora's tell, not regret, strategy. I leaned back, no longer trying to appear composed. They taught me strength like it was a virtue, told me how proud they were that I never complained, never made a fuss. But silence doesn't buy you safety. It just makes people comfortable with pretending you're not bleeding. I placed my fork down, the sound unusually final. Seraphine glanced at me, faintly amused. You knew, didn't you? Her face didn't change. Not really. But in the fraction of a second that followed, her knife paused mid-slice. Just long enough to notice. Her lips didn't move, but her eyes blinked. And I saw something crack behind the mascara. Seraphine didn't say a word. Her fork slowed slightly, just enough for me to catch it, but not enough for anyone else to notice. She didn't meet my eyes. Instead, she turned her head half an inch toward Valora, who, as if on cue, lifted the cranberry sauce and offered it across the table like I hadn't just asked the one question that cracked the entire evening open. There's more if you want, Valora said, voice syrupy, eyes deliberately focused on the food, not on me. I didn't answer. I stood up, pushed my chair back as gently as I could, and muttered something about needing to get some air. My legs moved on their own, past the dining room, through the hallway that still smelled faintly of varnished wood and distant perfume. The same hallway I used to race down barefoot as a kid, chasing echoes of a family I thought I belonged to. The kitchen was empty. The air felt heavier here, quiet but not peaceful, just thick with things unsaid. I leaned against the counter, trying to catch my breath. It wasn't the shock anymore. It was the recognition. The kind of recognition that settles in your bones when you realize everyone around you has rehearsed a scene you weren't invited to. She knew. Seraphine knew. That look wasn't guilt. It was control. That blink wasn't a flinch. It was calculation. Footsteps approached. I straightened. Ophalie, my aunt, rounded the corner with a half glass of wine and a handful of pie napkins. She gave me a half smile, like I was still 12. Your mom's been sending money to Seraphine like clockwork, she said casually, like she was commenting on the weather. I assumed you were getting the same. I swallowed hard. Oh? She sipped her wine. Yeah, for at least a year now. She mentioned it during brunch last month. Said Seraphine's project in LA needed real funding. Something about building her network. I nodded slowly, stretching a smile across my face so tight it hurt. That's great, I said. Ophalie patted my shoulder. You always were the strong one. Your mother says that all the time. Strong. That word again. The one they use to justify forgetting you exist. After she walked out, I stood there alone. I wanted to throw the wine glass. I wanted to scream. But instead, I walked upstairs. Back in my childhood room, I sat on the edge of the bed I didn't recognize anymore. The sheets were floral now, and the posters I once pinned up were long gone. The walls didn't know me. Neither did the people downstairs. I reached for my phone and opened Instagram. The first story on my feed was Seraphine's. She was on a rooftop in Santorini, bathed in sunset light, holding a glass of champagne. The caption read, "Thanks, Mom and Dad. Couldn't have done it without you." The date? Last May. The same week I ate ramen for 3 meals straight and used duct tape to keep my sneakers from falling apart on my hospital shift. The same week I asked Valora for help with a textbook and got left on red. I kept scrolling. Another photo of her standing by a whitewashed wall, tagged in Dior, with comments full of fire emojis and, "You're glowing!" I closed the app, opened my email, no payments, no deposits from any family accounts. Not this month, not last, not ever. I opened my banking app and started downloading every monthly statement from the past 2 years. Every overdraft fee, every tuition charge I paid out of pocket. Every night I pulled a shift at the bar instead of sleeping. I saved them all in a folder. I called it reality. No drama, no tears, just receipts. Then I went back to the photo of Seraphine holding her champagne glass. I didn't feel envy, not anymore. I felt clarity. I used to think we were on the same path. Turns out I was paving it. She was just being carried. I walked into the kitchen the next morning and found Virgil already there, performing his morning ritual like the previous night hadn't happened. The kettle steamed, the mugs lined up, everything in order, everything neat, like nothing was broken. He glanced over his shoulder and offered a soft smile, too gentle, too rehearsed. "Coffee?" he asked. I nodded, settling into the chair at the end of the island. It was the same seat I used to curl up in with a coloring book while he graded papers years ago. Now I barely fit in it. Or maybe it just didn't fit me anymore. He poured the dark roast, handed me a mug with a steady hand, then sat across from me. "Let's talk. Just us." That phrase used to mean something. It used to be sacred. His way of saying, "You matter to me." Now it sounded like a peace offering from someone who had finally realized the house had been on fire for a while. He stirred his coffee twice before speaking again. "I've been thinking about that academic break you took in the spring. Did it help at all?" I stared into my cup. "A break," I repeated. "You mean the semester I was suspended because I couldn't pay tuition?" His head jerked slightly, confused. "Seraphine said you'd taken time off voluntarily," he said, slower now, like the words were too hot in his mouth. "She told us she handled the issue." "She told you what made it easier for her," I replied, my voice flat. "I didn't take time off. I was cut off, and I begged for help. I emailed Mom. I texted both of you. No answer." Virgil's face fell. "Talia." "We didn't know." I set the mug down. "That's the problem, isn't it? You never asked." He didn't argue, didn't defend her, just nodded faintly like he was talking to a priest in a confession booth. After a long silence, he got up and left the room. I assumed that was the end of it, until I heard him return a few minutes later, holding an envelope, yellowed at the edges, sealed but smudged with old fingerprints. "I wrote this when you left for med school," he said, placing it in front of me. "Never sent it, not sure why." I waited until he left again before opening it. Inside was a handwritten letter. His handwriting was still sharp, angular, thoughtful. He'd written about how proud he was, how brave he thought I was for pursuing medicine, that he knew I'd do great things, not because I had to, but because I chose to. I read it twice, then a third time. It wasn't the words that hurt. It was the timing. He'd written a letter of belief but never sent support. Not when I asked. Not when I was falling apart. I folded the letter neatly and tucked it into my laptop sleeve. Not to cherish it, but to remember what belief without action looks like. Love that doesn't show up is just a note that never leaves the desk drawer. Later, in my room, I opened the email thread from the university's registrar, the one where they confirmed my suspension due to non-payment. I scrolled down to the timestamp when I'd messaged Mom, "Can you help me cover part of this? I'll pay you back by summer." She'd responded a day later, "Seraphine will handle it. You've always been so independent. I know you'll figure it out." I had figured it out, by working until 3 a.m., eating peanut butter sandwiches from the campus pantry, and keeping a smile on my face during anatomy labs, even when I could barely keep my eyes open. No one had called, no one had checked, and still, they sat around that dinner table like nothing had been missed. Virgil came back into the kitchen. He looked older in the morning light, like the overnight silence had aged him. "She makes it easy not to see," he said finally. "Seraphine. She presents things in a way that makes everyone feel better about not asking questions." I didn't nod. "That's her gift," I said, "and my curse." I took the last sip of lukewarm coffee, rose from the stool, and walked past him. Not in anger, but in clarity. "I don't need an apology," I said. "I need honesty, starting now." He opened his mouth like he might say something, then closed it again. Back in my room, I opened my laptop and pulled up the form for an academic appeal to the university. I started filling in the details, dates, context, tuition history. It felt like pressing on a bruise that was finally healing. Right before I hit submit, a notification popped up from my bank. Subject line: insufficient funds, overdraft fee applied. I let out a breath, opened the alert, and saw another transaction right underneath. Deposit, $3,500. Memo. For Seraphine's conference. I sat cross-legged on my old bed, back against the headboard, laptop in my lap, email still open. The bank notification lingered on the screen. Another overdraft. The third this semester. Below it, a line glowed in green. Transfer completed. $3,500 to Seraphine Ward. Memo. For conference deposit. That memo, 4 words, hurt more than any slap. I stared at the screen, watching the timestamp match exactly with Seraphine's post from last week. Her standing at a boutique hotel bar, captioned, "Prepping to pitch in NYC. Grateful doesn't even begin to cover it." The same day, my landlord had tacked a late rent notice on my door. The same day, I'd skipped lunch to afford antibiotics. I started clicking, bank records, old text messages, scholarship rejections. Each line of data was another betrayal that had once slipped under my radar. But not anymore. The math wasn't numbers anymore. It was a pattern, a signature of omission. The printer in the corner started humming as I hit print all. I didn't stop until there was a stack thick enough to build a case from, literally. Valora passed by the doorway as the last sheet slid out. She paused. "You're stronger, Telia," she said gently, as if I'd just passed a hard exam. "Always have been." I turned around, slowly. "That's not a compliment. That's what you say when you want permission to neglect someone." Her expression didn't shift, but her eyes hardened. "Don't twist this into something it's not. Your sister needs more support right now." I stood. "No, she needs more spin, and you've been writing it." She tilted her head. "Talia, you've always managed. You don't need—" "The most dangerous thing you can call a daughter," I cut in, "is the strong one. Because that's how you leave her starving, while praising her composure." Her mouth opened to reply, but I walked past her before she could. In the living room, Seraphine was mid-FaceTime call, her voice bright and breezy. "Yeah, I managed the UIC health partnership paperwork myself. It was intense, but worth it." I froze in the hallway. She didn't see me yet. She twirled a pen in her fingers like she was on a panel, not our couch. "Oh yeah, we'll submit the grant draft next month. I've already done that process once." I stepped forward. "Was that the partnership I handled last winter?" She turned slowly, startled, but tried to mask it with a smile. "You said I could co-present." I thought. "Co-present," I said, "not co-claim. I wrote every section of that grant. I interviewed the clinic leaders. I compiled the budget and citations." Valora appeared behind me. "It's not worth fighting over, Talia. You're in med school. You'll be fine." Seraphine leaned back on the couch, eyeing me like I was being dramatic. "Why does it matter if people think I did it? You're going to be a doctor." "I'm not jealous," I said, shaking. "I'm tired of bleeding for people who call it lipstick." Valora crossed her arms. "You always find a way, Talia. We knew you would." "You didn't believe in me," I replied. "You counted on me surviving silence." I turned and left before I said something that would leave permanent scars. Back in my room, I pulled open my laptop again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I opened a new folder on my desktop, Misused Funds. Inside, I dropped PDFs of every tuition payment I'd made alone. Screenshots of scholarship rejections citing financial overqualification, because Valora had claimed support on my behalf. Emails where Seraphine's name showed up in places I never gave her access to. Another folder, Denied Requests. Texts, emails, calls I'd made asking for help. No replies. Or worse, she'll handle it. A third folder, Media Proof. Instagram stories, website links, press releases where my work wore Seraphine's name. I clicked into my contacts and scrolled to a saved number I'd never used. Legal Aid, Chicago. My hands hovered over the keyboard for a breath. Then I started typing. "Hi, I'm looking for someone to speak to about financial misrepresentation involving a family-controlled education fund." Before I could hit send, my phone lit up again. New notification. Seraphine Ward just posted. "Another dream funded. Thanks to the best mom ever." By the time the sun dipped behind the neighbors' rooftops, the air inside the house had thickened with avoidance. No one mentioned lunch, or the awkward shuffle after coffee, or the bruised silences stacking up like plates no one wanted to wash. I stayed in my room most of the afternoon, switching between my email drafts and my banking records, like flipping through old photos I didn't ask to remember. When the house quieted, when I heard the TV in the living room humming low and the soft clinking of a spoon in a mug, I walked downstairs. Virgil was on the couch, flipping through a paperback he probably wasn't reading. I stopped just outside the room. "Did you approve those transfers to Seraphine?" My voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. He looked up, confused at first. "What transfers?" "The ones Valora has been sending, every month. Thousands." I stepped forward. "Did you know?" His brow furrowed. "Your mother said it was all being handled. I signed off once, back when the trust account was divided. She said she'd split it fairly." I held up my phone. The screen showed months of one-sided transactions, all to Seraphine. "You didn't follow up?" I assumed it was even. "Equality isn't something you guess at, Dad," I said. "You track it. You make sure it's real." He set the book down slowly, like it had just gotten too heavy to hold. Valora appeared in the doorway behind me. "Taklia, this really isn't the time." "No," I said. "It wasn't the time when I asked for help either. That didn't stop you." She glanced at Virgil, but he looked away. "I submitted FAFSA last spring," I continued. "I should have been eligible for need-based grants, but I was disqualified. You know why?" Valora crossed her arms. "You must have made too much." "No. You filed that both your daughters were receiving equal support, and only one of us was." She pursed her lips. "I didn't think it would matter. You're always the one who lands on her feet." I laughed, sharp, bitter. "You don't get to call it faith when it's laziness dressed as love." Seraphine entered just as my words hung in the air. She looked at the three of us, and then, like she was walking into a high school play she'd already memorized, asked, "Are we really doing this now?" I turned to her. "No, I'm done doing anything on your schedule." "You're overreacting," she said with a smirk. I stepped closer. "No, I'm just done underreacting." Valora lifted her hand as if to calm the room. "Let's not blow this up, please." "You all blew it up," I said. "You just hoped I'd stay quiet under the debris." Virgil still hadn't moved. His silence said everything, and for once, I didn't feel sorry for him. I turned to Seraphine. "You've taken my name for job applications, used my projects as talking points, let Mom fund your travel from the account that was supposed to support us both. And when I confronted it, you smiled like I was dramatic. You're making this ugly." "It already was ugly. I'm just taking the blindfold off." She scoffed. Valora pointed at me. "You're bringing shame to this family." I stared at her, steady. "I'm not destroying the family. I'm just refusing to carry its lies anymore." I walked out, this time to my room, not to hide, but to prepare. I reopened the folders on my desktop. Misused funds, denied requests, media proof. I started drafting my financial report. Not for a scholarship this time, but for a lawyer. I opened a new document titled Statement of Allocation Discrepancy, Ward Family Trust. And then I opened the tab I'd saved, Legal Aid, Chicago. I clicked Request a Consultation. My fingers hovered before typing. "Hi, I'm seeking guidance regarding a financial misrepresentation involving trust misallocation, academic impact, and potential fraud by a parental administrator." The words didn't come easy, but they came. Then, just before I hit send, Valora's voice floated up the stairs. Low, clipped. "She just can't stand not being the center of everything." I paused. I stood, walked slowly to the top of the stairs. "What did you just say?" I stood at the top of the stairs, her words still lingering like the last puff of smoke after a house fire. "She just can't stand not being the center of everything." I descended slowly, not rushing, not storming, just walking like every step confirmed exactly what I already knew. Valora didn't flinch when I entered the room. She kept sipping her tea as if I hadn't just caught her tearing apart whatever was left of decency. "What did you say?" I asked, steady. She looked up at me over the rim of her cup, shrugged with that tired smugness only mothers who weaponize martyrdom can wear. "Some daughters know when to be grateful." That was all it took. The weight in my hands wasn't emotional anymore. It was literal. I held the printed statements I'd compiled all day. I walked into the formal living room, where Virgil sat in the corner recliner, and Seraphine had just curled up on the couch, like the star of some chic indie drama. I laid the papers on the coffee table, one by one, quietly, like setting down dominoes. "These," I said, "are the monthly transfers. All to Seraphine, every last one." Virgil blinked. "But I thought it was split." "No," I said. "You assumed. There's a difference." Valora stood. "You always had scholarships, Talia." She needed help building her brand. Virgil's voice cracked. "I only signed the joint access once. I didn't authorize all this." "You didn't monitor it either," I replied, sharp. "It was joint, yes, but she drained it solo." Seraphine crossed her legs, ever composed. "It was to support both of us." "You keep using that word like it's noble," I snapped. "Support isn't theft just because you smiled when you took it." I reached into my folder again and pulled out the next envelope. "This one's better." I tossed it on the table. A copy of a credit agreement. "This account is in my name. I thought I was signing off for a shared purchase for your camera project," I said to Seraphine. "Turns out, I co-signed your lifestyle." She glanced at Valora. "You said it wouldn't follow her." Valora didn't respond. "You co-signed," Valora said finally, cold and flat. "No," I said. "I was tricked into co-owning your daughter's dream." Silence again. Then Seraphine scoffed. "I didn't ask for any of this. I just said yes when Mom offered." "That's the difference," I said. "You didn't ask because you never had to. I had to beg, and I still got ignored." Virgil looked at Valora, really looked at her for once. "How long have you known?" Valora folded her arms. "Since last spring." His jaw clenched. For a second, I thought he might defend her. Instead, he looked at me, finally. Not like I was dramatic, or exhausting, or difficult, just like I was undeniable. I turned and looked at them all. Not as my family, but as facts. "Family isn't blood," I said. "It's who shows up when it hurts. And none of you did." "You taught me to survive," I continued. "Well done. I learned it so well, I no longer need you." I walked toward the front door. Virgil stood, reached a hand out. "Talia, where are you going?" "To finish my future," I said. "And maybe rewrite my past while I'm at it." I pulled open the door. The wind hit me full in the face, colder than it had been earlier. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it until I reached the edge of the porch. Then I pulled it out. New alert. Experian credit monitoring. New inquiry. Luxury auto finance. I stared at the screen. And just like that, I knew this wasn't over. The kitchen smelled like vanilla creamer and toasted bagels when I walked in. The kind of scent that tries to disguise rot with sweetness. Valora and Seraphine sat at the table laughing. Casual, unbothered. Like the past 24 hours had been a hiccup, not a war. Virgil was gone, probably on one of his guilt walks through the neighborhood, pretending the sidewalk could offer answers he wasn't brave enough to ask for inside the house. I stood there for a moment before stepping in, my movements automatic, calculating. The air shifted slightly when they noticed me, but neither said a word. Valora just refilled her coffee. Seraphine scrolled her phone with a smirk that wasn't aimed at me, but existed too loudly to ignore. Some people make war look like brunch. That's how they win. By dressing it in calm, by making your truth sound hysterical when you speak it aloud. My phone buzzed. A message from Maya, a classmate from med school. "Hey, is this you?" Someone just reposted it. I clicked the link. And there it was. My video. The one I'd recorded in a dorm bathroom months ago. Hair a mess, eyes hollow, whispering into my cracked phone about burnout, shame, trying to keep my head above water. I'd sent it to Seraphine once, in a moment of weakness, asking if it was too vulnerable to share. She never replied. Now it was on a mental health page, edited, curated, and layered with voice-over narration. Her voice. Her damn voice. Seraphine had used my breakdown as the backdrop to her empowerment monologue. She added music, lighting adjustments, and a caption. Sometimes strength means saying, I'm not okay. Let's normalize vulnerability. She didn't just steal my pain, she filtered it. I turned to her. Really? She blinked, feigning confusion. What? You used my video, the one I sent you in confidence. Oh, that? She laughed softly. Talia, you always say you want to help people. I gave your pain a platform. I stepped forward. You gave yourself a platform, on my back. Valora raised a hand, like a referee between toddlers. Let's not make this into another thing. It already is a thing, I snapped. She took my worst moment and turned it into content. Seraphine looked down at her mug, still calm. You're always so dramatic. I didn't respond. I just walked away. Later that afternoon, I found her latest podcast episode, The Cost of a Dream, My Family Story. I pressed play. Her voice, smooth and warm, filled my room. My sister and I were raised with two different expectations, she said. I was always the one needing guidance. She was the one expected to just manage. And manage she did, until she broke. She paused for effect. I remember walking past her room late at night. She'd cry so quietly you could barely hear it. I used to wonder, how does she keep going? And then she said it. The exact phrase I'd written in my essay for that fellowship I never got. I survived so well, no one noticed I was drowning. She didn't steal my words. She colonized them. I opened the podcast app and left a comment. Brief, precise. There's something truly sad about monetizing someone else's wounds. By the time I checked again, an hour later, the episode had been deleted. That night, she came to my room. I don't get it, she said at the door. Why are you trying to sabotage me? I looked up from my laptop. You're not being sabotaged. You're being cited for plagiarism of identity. Her jaw clenched. You don't own sadness, Talia. No, but I lived mine. You just copied and pasted. I closed the door without waiting for more. The next morning, I printed the legal disclaimer on personal likeness and digital consent. I filled out a small claims complaint. I didn't expect to win. That wasn't the point. I just wanted the court record to show I refused to be quiet currency anymore. As I stepped out of the courthouse downtown, coat wrapped tight, wind biting, I spotted Valora leaning against her car in the lot, waiting. You really went through with it, she said as I walked by. I didn't slow down. This could ruin your sister's future. I stopped, turned to her. Then she shouldn't have built it on my past. That night, just after dinner, a knock came at the front door. I opened it slowly. A delivery man stood holding a stack of documents, stapled thick. The envelope on top was addressed to me. The knock came just as I was setting my laptop aside. A single, sharp rap on the door. Not frantic, but purposeful. I opened it to find Maya standing there, clutching a manila folder against her chest like it was radioactive. You need to see this, she said softly. We sat on the stairs, far from the buzz of Valora and Seraphine's evening wine in the living room. She pulled out a printout, application materials from a national ad campaign. My name was typed at the top. The photo wasn't mine. Seraphine's face stared back at me, styled, posed, confident. I found 3 more, Maya whispered. Scholarships, 2 award submissions, and this, all using your name, her email, her number. I wasn't surprised. Not really. But there was something about seeing it in ink, on paper, that made it hit harder. Like betrayal doesn't hurt until it's been notarized. I always thought betrayal would come like a scream, I muttered. Turns out it slips through inboxes. Maya stayed long enough to offer quiet solidarity. Then she left me with the folder. I didn't knock. I didn't wait. I walked into the living room where Valora and Seraphine sat surrounded by soft lighting, Merlot, and delusion. I dropped the folder on the coffee table. Seraphine looked up mid-laugh. Valora stopped pouring. Would you like to explain why your headshot is on an application that has my name on it? I asked, calm enough to scare them both. Seraphine blinked. Oh, that! Talia, come on, it's just a technicality. A technicality? I said, holding up the page. You submitted for a diversity initiative under my name. You weren't using it, she said with a shrug. My name isn't your accessory. Valora tried to speak. I raised a hand to stop her. I'm not finished. I walked to the dining room and returned with my binder, the one I had labeled proof. I laid it all out. Bank statements, rejected scholarships, printouts of Seraphine's social posts where she thanked our parents for opportunities I never received. This isn't a dinner table anymore, I said to Virgil, who had just entered the room. This is discovery. I made Seraphine read the transfers aloud. Month by month, year by year. At month 6, her voice cracked. At month 9, she stopped reading. Fine, she snapped. I took it because she never needed it. Valora lunged to stop her, but the damage was done. Virgil stood frozen, his hands clasped in front of him, like in prayer. You let me believe she was okay. She was surviving, Valora said quickly, her voice tight. So we stopped feeding her? He asked. The room fell into a silence so dense it felt like sound had been outlawed. Seraphine began to cry. Quiet, elegant tears. You don't get to cry now, I said. You've built your life on my story, on my hunger. Virgil looked at me. I need to fix this. You can't fix me like a broken appliance, I replied. You can only stop breaking things. I turned toward the stairs. Valora reached for me. Please, don't do this here. It's still family. I stopped and faced her one last time. Family is who doesn't starve you so someone else can shine. I picked up the folder, walked to the door, and opened it. The night air hit like truth, bracing and impossible to ignore. Just as I stepped onto the porch, Virgil's voice floated behind me. I need one night, he called out. Stay, just one. The house was silent in the way only damage can demand, like it knew what had been said the night before and was trying not to breathe too loud. I woke up before the sun crept through the blinds, my body stiff from sleeping in jeans, my mind sharper than it should have been. I walked into the kitchen barefoot. The tiles felt cold, the way they always had in November. But this morning, it wasn't just the floor that chilled me. It was the air, heavy with everything that hadn't been cleaned up after the war I'd waged less than 12 hours ago. The coffee brewed slowly. I didn't bother with creamer. Bitterness felt right. I sipped with hands, still remembering how tightly they'd gripped the folder. Evidence, proof, pain bound in paper. This wasn't peace. It was the pause after fire, when the walls are still standing, but every joint creaks like it's deciding whether to hold or let go. I wandered toward the study. Virgil's door was ajar. He was at his desk, still in yesterday's clothes, staring at the computer like it had delivered bad news it didn't have the guts to say out loud. I saw the emails, I said, my voice even. He didn't turn right away, just tapped the desk slowly. I should have asked more. I should have looked closer. No, I replied. You didn't want to look, because then you'd have to act. He finally faced me. I'm sorry you had to carry that weight. I was a child, I said, and you were the one holding the scale. There was no fight in his eyes, only resignation, and that somehow hurt more. Back in my room, I opened my laptop. I hadn't touched the internship rejection email since it arrived weeks ago. not because I accepted it, but because I knew there was more beneath the surface. I pulled up the chain, scrolled past the standard regretful language, attached files. And there it was. Valora had submitted a recommendation, weeks before the deadline, but she'd sent it to the wrong contact. And worse, in a separate forwarded thread, I found a note she'd written to a program director for a different internship, the one Seraphine eventually got. "We've invested more in Seraphine lately," Valora had typed. "She better reflects our values." I stared at that line so long, the words lost their shape. They didn't just choose her. They sold her. As me. I saved the threads, compiled the timelines, screenshots, and notes into a single PDF. I titled it, Internship Appeal, Identity Misalignment. I sent it to the board with a short message. I wasn't asking for reinstatement. I was asking to be seen. Correctly. Packing was quiet. I didn't need to slam drawers or huff through the hallway. I folded clothes like I was folding chapters, carefully, decisively. Midway through zipping my suitcase, I heard a knock. Soft. Controlled. Valora. She didn't open the door, didn't say my name, just stood there. I didn't say a word either. And after a moment, I heard her footsteps retreat down the hall. No apology, no denial, just silence, the kind that confirms everything. I closed the suitcase and sat for a second, breathing in what used to be mine. The posters were gone, but the smell of lemon floor cleaner lingered from some chore-filled childhood memory. Even now, this room clung to being helpful. My phone vibrated. I reached for it absently. A new message. From Seraphine. Just one line. I finally see it too. I walked into the county building just after lunch, a manila envelope pressed against my ribs like a shield. The receptionist behind the glass didn't flinch when I slid it across the counter. She pointed to a clipboard. I signed my name, initials too, and handed over the formal notification of misused educational trust funds. 2 copies went to the Grant Foundation, 1 to the legal department that oversees the family account, and the last, that one was personal. "This isn't revenge," I whispered to myself as I stepped outside, squinting into the late autumn sun. It's recognition of everything I was told to ignore. Later that afternoon, I sat with the pro bono attorney, a woman named Jill who had a sharp mind and eyes that didn't flinch. She handed me a copy of my uncle's original trust. His stipulations were clear. Funds were to support any child pursuing a medical degree. No mention of entrepreneurship. No clause for creative interpretation. Valora had transferred over $40,000 into a side LLC last year. Fashion consulting. Travel expenses labeled network development. Jill raised an eyebrow. "Your mother called it educational support." I laughed. "She called it rebranding Seraphine." Jill didn't smile. "You didn't bend the rule," I said, rehearsing what I'd write in my follow-up statement. "You rewrote the will." By the time I got back home, the kitchen smelled like burnt toast and tension. Virgil sat at the table in his favorite cardigan, one hand gripping a thick white envelope. Valora was across from him, lips tight, jaw working behind silence. He slid the envelope across the table. "I'm moving half of our joint assets into a protected education fund for Talia," he said. Quiet, controlled. Valora's chair creaked as she leaned back. "You're doing this without talking to me first?" "You acted alone," he said, eyes steady. "You'll correct this alone." She stared at him like she didn't recognize his face. He pushed a second envelope toward her. This one legal, stamped, sealed. Seraphine stood behind her mother, for once not saying a word. Not smiling. Not shifting blame. That silence was louder than any of her speeches. I didn't speak either. I just picked up the envelope, nodded once, and left the room. Outside the courthouse, I sat in my car watching the door, engine off, the quiet thick around me. I hadn't expected her to follow me, but she did. Seraphine walked out alone, heels clicking, face pale. She approached slowly, carrying nothing. No files, no folder, just guilt wearing a very expensive coat. "I didn't come to fight," she said. "Didn't think you did." "I know this could ruin everything I've worked for." "No," I said. "This could expose everything you stole." She nodded once. "Then let me say this. You were always the better one." I leaned against the door. "No, I was just the quieter one." She didn't reply, didn't cry. She just turned and walked back inside, and for the first time, I felt no heat in my chest, no shaking in my fingers, just stillness. I didn't post about the complaint, didn't update my story with cryptic quotes. I didn't need digital applause. I drove home with the windows down, letting the wind pull the weight off my shoulders one thread at a time. Justice doesn't come with fireworks. It just clears the air so you can finally breathe. I pulled into my driveway and turned the key in the ignition. The engine stopped. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. New notification, transfer received, academic relief fund, $38,000. 2 days passed in silence. Not the fragile kind that waits to be broken, but the type that settles into furniture and walls. An unspoken pact that no one's going to say the thing everyone's thinking. I sat on the front porch as the sun dipped lower than my patience. Coffee in hand, more for habit than comfort. Valora hadn't said a word since the fund was reallocated. No sharp comments, no strategic pity. Just absence, her favorite form of denial. Virgil moved through the house with quiet purpose, folding linens in the guest room, taking down old frames. No speeches, just actions. Sometimes it's not the apology that matters. It's the space they finally give you. The wind shifted slightly. I opened my phone, not for distraction, but to clear out lingering emails. That's when I saw it. My cousin Claire had forwarded a screenshot. A family group chat. The one I'd never been part of. Photos. Dozens. Seraphine's birthdays. Seraphine's promotions. Seraphine's brunches. Even a blurry shot of Valora and Seraphine at a holiday craft fair, arms linked, captioned, "My whole heart." There wasn't a single photo of me. Not one. Even when I smiled in those moments, I wasn't in the picture. That was the part that stung. Not what they said, but what they didn't. I stood up, walked inside, and began packing with mechanical calm. I didn't make a scene, didn't slam drawers or toss things into bags. Just one duffel, one folder, one copy of the trust amendment, neatly tucked inside. As I zipped the bag, Seraphine appeared at the doorway. "You're really not coming back?" I didn't look up. "I'm not leaving. I'm just done arriving where I was never expected." We held eye contact for a beat too long. For once, she didn't perform. She just nodded, slowly, and stepped aside. Out in the driveway, Virgil stood by the hood of my car. He didn't hold a suitcase or a hug, just a folded piece of paper. "I let you fade," he said. I took the note from his hand without reply. "I let myself burn quietly," I said. He didn't try to deny it. Just looked down at the asphalt like it held answers he hadn't earned. In the car, I unfolded the paper. His handwriting, precise as ever. "You were never invisible." I just didn't know how to look. I folded it once more and slipped it into my glove box. Not because it fixed anything, but because it was something. Not redemption, but acknowledgement. The engine turned. I backed out slowly, gravel crunching beneath me. I didn't check the rearview mirror. The house got smaller behind me, and still, my chest felt bigger. You can forgive people and still never speak to them again. That's not cruelty. That's survival. As I crossed the bridge out of town, my phone vibrated on the passenger seat. New email. "Congratulations! You've been awarded Chicago Women in Medicine Resilience Grant." The lights above the conference stage were warmer than I'd expected, casting a soft glow over the room instead of washing everything out. I stood at the side, hands clasped in front of me, listening as they read the names of this year's honorees. When mine came last, the applause didn't thunder. It hummed. Respectful. Quietly proud. I walked out in a tailored black suit I'd bought secondhand and had altered to fit just right. My shoes didn't hurt. My hands didn't shake. I accepted the plaque, smiled for one camera, and let the moment pass through me without needing to hold it too tightly. I didn't win because I suffered. I won because I survived out loud. Back at my new apartment later that evening, I turned on one lamp and nothing else. The silence was clean here. No history built into the drywall. No echoes to dodge. There was one box I hadn't unpacked. It sat under my desk, taped shut with a label that had faded in the move. I opened it slowly, like I knew what was waiting. At the bottom, wrapped in a file folder, was Valora's journal. I didn't flip through it. I knew the page. Talia is too cold. Seraphine is the one with heart. I stared at the sentence, not with anger, but with acknowledgement. That's how she'd always seen us. Not as daughters, but as characters she could sculpt. One the hero, the other the ghost. I folded the page quietly, struck a match, and let the flame eat it away in the kitchen sink. "You don't get to define me," I whispered. "Not anymore." Before the ashes cooled, I scanned the page and emailed it to the trust lawyer, not out of revenge, but because truth deserves paper trails too. Let her live, knowing what she wrote, helped end what she built. The following week, Seraphine's brand collapsed under the weight of its own fiction. Internal audits surfaced. A grant program revoked its support, citing misrepresentation. Her name dropped off sponsorship lists like a stone through water. She sent me a voice memo. 7 minutes of silence, apology, and rewrites of the past I wasn't obligated to believe. I listened once, then deleted it. Closure isn't a reply. Sometimes it's just the absence of one. Valora didn't respond publicly. She was quietly removed as executor of the family trust. Ophélie took over, graceful, firm, and without fanfare. Virgil packed his things within a week. He didn't yell, didn't blame. He just said, "I stayed too silent, but I'm not staying anymore." There was no court hearing, no knockdown, just quiet exits. I filled my new space with color. Not just the walls, but plants, rugs, a crooked bookshelf that I didn't bother fixing. I printed my medical school acceptance letter and framed it, not for guests, but for me. No designer lighting, no curated stories, just a kitchen that belonged to me, a city that didn't know my past, and mornings that started with silence I'd chosen, not inherited. People think the opposite of hurt is healing. It's not. It's choosing not to carry their weight anymore. Sometimes we think we need grand revenge, justice that knocks on doors in the middle of the night. But sometimes justice is a box of things you don't take with you, a number you delete, a room that no longer smells like someone else's disappointment. Sometimes justice is walking away and never waiting for them to follow. I stood at the window, city lights glowing outside, and whispered into the glass. I used to think love had to be proven, that silence meant strength, that being needed was the same as being seen. Now I know better. Sometimes your story begins the moment you stop waiting for someone else to tell it. I used to believe that survival meant silence, that being the strong one was a badge of honor. But what I've learned, what life carved into me, is that strength isn't measured by how much you endure without complaint. It's measured by when you decide enough is enough. If this story has taught me anything, it's that not all battles are fought in courtrooms or on doorsteps. Some are fought in kitchens, in quiet glances, in emails that never get replies. And sometimes, justice isn't loud. It's choosing your peace over their permission. So if you're listening to this, and there's a part of you that's been waiting to be heard, to be seen, to be valued, let this be your sign. You don't need anyone's validation to reclaim your story. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What part of this journey spoke to you the loudest? Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own family? Drop a 1 in the comments if this story hit home. Or tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to know. And if it didn't speak to you, tell me why. Every story isn't for everyone, and your voice matters too. If this video reached your heart, inspired you, or made you pause and reflect, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the next story, because the next chapter might just be yours.